Thanks for stopping by my session today. We're going to talk about remotely automating Mac services from ServiceNow with the ITS Jamf integration. Wish we could all be hanging out in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a cool city, but obviously staying safe and healthy, probably a little bit cooler. So thanks for stopping by my session today. We'll get into the forward-looking statement disclaimer, give you a few seconds to digest that sweet fine print. There you go. You've probably read every word, I'm sure. Let's get into introductions. So my name is Jay Weigard. I am Director of Innovation at ITS Partners. ITS Partners been around for 30 plus years. We have been doing ServiceNow implementations for the past 7. We are in the elite tier of partners. We've done over 100 ServiceNow implementations. My team specifically, ITS Innovations, does product development, app development, which for us primarily means putting apps, building apps for the ServiceNow store, like our ITS Jamf integration. So today we are going to go over a few different stories. We're going to basically do a little bit of a speed run here because we've only got half an hour, but we're going to show you how to enable the help desk with accurate Cmdb data, remotely deliver software, and remotely reclaim software, and triggered Jamf remote management commands from ServiceNow. So we put a really big focus this year on adding in features into the integration to enable the much larger remote workforces that everybody is having to support. So what is ServiceNow? I got hired at ServiceNow a few years ago and everybody was like, oh, that's cool. It's like that help desk platform. And that was surprising to me because to me, it's a lot more than just a help desk. It's a center of IT operations. It provides a single pane of glass for IT, in the form of, you get a configuration management database, you get asset management, automation, orchestration, software asset management. You can do artificial intelligence on the platform, machine learning, vulnerability management, HR. You do definitely a lot of stuff. And also it is kind of a help desk. I mean, it has those functionality. It has that functionality to it. I think that tends to be where a lot of ServiceNow customers start, and then they kind of start expanding out from there. So that brings us to our ITS Jamf integration. We first released this last March, I think March of 2019. The integration started with the ability to automate your Cmdb hardware and software import from Jamf to ServiceNow, getting you that detailed hardware and software inventory information. Part of how we're able to get the detailed software inventory is with our software inventory policy and script, which allows us to get some detailed software publisher information that is not available otherwise in the classic API. Within Jamf, which is what the integration leverages today. So we're able to get detailed software publisher information, install directories, all that kind of stuff that you really need to do software asset management in ServiceNow, which brings us to, I guess, bullet point 2 in our big feature list here. You can now automate software asset management via Jamf policies, which is really cool. So you can deploy software remotely, and also analyze software metering, like AKA software usage. How many minutes and seconds is somebody using a given piece of software in a month? And then what you can do is you can reclaim underutilized software. So if you set a threshold, maybe 10 hours a month or something like that, and somebody isn't meeting that criteria, you can actually automate the removal of that license, or at least kind of identify those users. So the next time you need licenses, you can potentially reclaim those instead of going out and purchasing more licenses. And then new in version 1.2.2, you can now trigger Jamf remote management commands from ServiceNow. So you can trigger those from the CI form, the configuration item in the Cmdb, or you can now also do the same from various workflows. We made the script include that enables this public so that you can access it and kind of build your own functionality with it. So why integrate? Why integrate Jamf into ServiceNow? What we're finding is that for most companies, there's a max-sized gap in their IT processes. It's really hard for IT to support what they don't know about. And while Jamf is a great wealth of information about all of the Mac data, the Mac environment within your company, ServiceNow is the system of record for IT and business processes, and it's really where ServiceNow customers want to be centralizing all of their systems. And I mean, beyond that, you don't really want everyone in your Jamf instance, right? You want everyone to have access to that data that needs to have access to it, but using an integration allows you to get them access to that data without necessarily giving them access to your Jamf platform. And then, automating that process of kind of syncing the data to and from, ServiceNow and Jamf, it's not just a nice to have, it standardizes. Automation is, I think for a lot of people, maybe thought of as something that's nice to have, maybe not necessary, but it standardizes process. Once you automate something, that is kind of the way it's going to be done every time. So it ensures quality and really helps to free IT to do other things. And then beyond that, I mean, the thing that always kind of speaks loudest to people are dollars and cents, right? When you're dealing with IT, things are expensive. And recent studies have shown that software asset management can potentially save 22% on IT enterprise software spend. So for everybody on the call, I think if you were to take your enterprise IT software spend number, multiply it by 22%, you come up with a number that is large enough to really cover the cost of the tools that enable software asset management, which is a really cool thing, I think, in technology, when you can see kind of a very real return on your investment and not just kind of a promise of cool functionality. So how you do that, again, is with metering, taking a look at how often and how long your users are interacting with software, and then identifying candidates that are not meeting your usage requirements and reclaiming those licenses. And now we can kind of automate that whole process, which is pretty cool. So let's get into some demos here. So we're going to do a how-to in terms of automating the Cmdb import. All right, so in order to do the Cmdb import, we've got to install the integration. I'm going to spare you that particular detail. Then we're going to complete the guided setup, which is pretty quick and painless. If we want to pull the software inventory details, we're going to have to add some users to the policy scope. I've already got that set up. And then we're going to just set a scheduled time for the import to run. So let's go ahead and start sharing our tab. And we're going to get, this is the tab. Okay. So really quickly, we'll just kind of go through the guided setup. There are some configurations that need to be made to kind of allow the integration permissions to interact with the software table. We can make that available here through an update set where you can just download and then apply in the same view here. I've already applied that. So we're going to move on to the next step where you would put in the API credentials. You'll see once you hit that save button, you get an automatic kind of fail or success indication on the connection. And then the integration is also going to try to deploy out the software inventory policy and script as long as it has permissions. And then it gives you just this little bit of feedback showing you kind of what some of the data looks like from Jamf so that you can verify that the connection was successful. The integration will support multiple instances here. If you have more than one Jamf instance, we can pull from that. If you are in the cloud, you won't need to select a mid server here, but if you are hosting your Jamf environment on-prem, then you would want to select a mid server. And then that's basically all you kind of need to do for the on-prem. I'm just going to go ahead and move on to the next step. So this is making sure that the asset information that we import from Jamf is assigned to the correct person. So we're just going to specify a field that's going to be consistent between the user tables. So in our environment, the name contains the login ID, which is going to be consistent with the username in ServiceNow. So we can just click map users here, move on to the next step. Now we're just scheduling. So the days that are highlighted green are going to be the days that the integration runs, and it's going to run at this specified time. So at that point, I can click update schedule. Note that we keep all the instructions here pretty lean, but we do have some additional detail hidden underneath of these little help links. So I'm going to go ahead and click update schedule. And that's it. The integration is configured to run Monday through Friday at 2 a.m. And then we can head over to the integration dashboard and take a look at the data that has been brought in. So this dashboard just contextualizes the data that comes in from the imports. You can see a little report of everything that happened on the previous run. And then we can take a look at what the actual one of the computer records looks like. I've got to switch my tab that I'm sharing here. 1 second. There we go. So here's a list of computers that have been brought in by the integration. I'm just going to click into one of these, and we can take a quick peek at these details. So now we can see the display name of this computer, asset tag, serial number, model information, model number, who it's assigned to, and then it's going to pull the location of the assigned to users so that we can see where we should expect this computer to be geographically. We've also got the IP address info, most recent discovery, date, correlation ID, which contains the Jamf ID. And then we're down into the configuration details. So we've got your basic operating system and version info, disk space, RAM, CPU count and core count and manufacturer, all that fun stuff. And we're down into the related records. We can see disk information, network adapters, IP address, MAC address on those. Local accounts, we can see the local accounts on the machine. We could see if this user is the last logged in user, when they last logged in, do they have admin rights, what was their home drive, do they have file vault enabled. We can take a look and see the IP addresses that have been discovered. And then we've also got the Jamf computer extension attributes here, so you can build reports off of those in ServiceNow. And then, of course, the software installation data, where you can see that the publisher is pretty consistently filled in here. Again, this publisher information is one of the pieces that comes through from our software inventory policy and script. If you're just looking at the Jamf Classic API, you're not going to find anything about the publisher information. So we developed our software inventory policy and script so that we can collect this more detailed publisher info, which is required to do software asset management within ServiceNow. We can also optionally import certificates from Jamf, but we don't have that turned on by default. So that is it for our basic hardware data. We also have similar data for, I guess, all of your tvOS, iPhone, iPads, etc. I'm going to spare you those details though, because we only have so much time and I'm trying to do my speed run here. So let's get into a how-to on the remote software delivery. So to do the remote software delivery with the integration, we need to have done everything basically up until now. So we need to have run that Cmdb import after the guided setup, which we already have that data in the system. Then we need to go over to the Jamf software portal and complete the portal setup import policies from Jamf, and then we're going to create software configurations to basically connect all of the Jamf install and uninstall policies to a service catalog item within ServiceNow. So the end result is that your end users get an online shopping experience, which is really helpful, and then you get less emails from people asking for a license to Photoshop. So let's go ahead and share one of those browser tabs again and get into that part of the demo. So I'm just going to type Jamf software, and that will give us the software distribution portal. Now we can click discover policies here. I've already got this set up. I'm doing this slightly out of order, but this button is going to import all of your Jamf policies in groups so that you can correctly kind of automate the move of users or computers into and out of those policies. Setting this up is actually a pretty quick process that I could show here. So we're just going to put in like a group of users who will be notified if licenses are needed. So the procurement group. We pick a default variable set. So one ships with the integration out of box, but if you have other requirements, you can specify a different variable set for your needs. And then we're just going to tell the integration which policies we want to import. I'm just going to select all for simplicity. And then when do we want the integration to pull all that policy information? So this is a fairly light pull, getting the policy info. So I'm just going to leave it running 5 days a week. And then that would be it in terms of the basic setup. So then now the way that we orchestrate all of this is around the concept of software configurations. So the software configuration is going to glue together this software model for Adobe Systems Photoshop. We've got some entitlements in the system, which kind of tracks how many licenses we have available and how many are currently allocated, etc. And we've got to pick a discovery model here so that the integration knows where to find the install path. And then we're just going to pick this Photoshop DMG policy. We are going to include an uninstall policy so that we can do the software reclamation. The integration can create these automatically, but we have one in our environment, so I'm going to set that to false. And then I'm just going to pick that uninstall Adobe Photoshop package here. And then we'll click next. We're going to name this Adobe Photoshop Jamf demo. Go ahead and pick software as our category. We've got our variables set there. Note that we can override that on a kind of a catalog item by catalog item basis. And hey, super cool Photoshop. We'll put a dollar amount on this. And then we can go ahead and click next. That's it on the setup side of things. So we can then go over and let's impersonate a user requesting. I've got to switch tabs because that opened in a new tab. 1 second here. We've got to open up the service portal tab. There we go. We're going to go ahead and request something. I am going to be lazy and just search for it. We'll do Photoshop. There we go. Adobe Photoshop Jamf demo. Now you can get a lot fancier with this and add images and things like that. This is just kind of a down and dirty demo. So I'm going to pick test 2 as my computer here. And then I can click order now. And I'm going to select somebody else just to kind of demonstrate that we can do this, so you can request ServiceNow, or you can request software on behalf of somebody else in your ServiceNow environment. And we'll just go ahead and click checkout, and we can see what happens. So in this case, we have some dollar amount thresholds where anything below $1,000 will get an automated approval, so that the approval has been completed. We've got the deployment scheduled, and it's basically just kind of waiting for the scheduled job to pick that up and deploy the software. It actually might be waiting for the user to check in to that Jamf policy. But basically, once this user goes ahead and checks into Jamf through the normal process, they will have Photoshop available to them, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and switch over to the inverse. So the inverse is automating the software reclamation or removal. In order to do that, we need to basically have completed everything that we've seen in the demo so far. And we need to make sure that we have uninstall policies set up. Now, you can technically reclaim software without the automated uninstallation or the automated uninstall policies. Then in that case, it just would be like a little bit of a manual component. Then the next requirement for completing this would be creating an actual reclamation rule in ServiceNow for the titles that you want to meter or monitor. And then ServiceNow is going to generate reclamation candidates for any users that have usage recorded that's less than what is required by the reclamation rule. And then if there are uninstall policies to move them into, then the integration will kick off a workflow to move their computer into that uninstall policy. And you can do that with or without approvals, basically. So let's go ahead and switch back to one of our ServiceNow tabs so that we can demo this functionality. So I'm going to go over here into the left and select Reclamation Rules. So we've already created this. Basically, you want to specify the reclamation type as total usage time. We're going to aggregate usage by last month. And we've got the total hours set at 10. So this is the amount of time in hours which a user needs to use that piece of software in order to justify them having the license. And then we've got down here, we've got our software product specified as Photoshop. And then you can see that the ServiceNow platform is kind of smart enough to know that there are a number of different titles, or I guess processes, which all kind of resolve to Photoshop. So that normalization piece is obviously very important because all the different platforms and versions are kind of named differently. So it's one of the great things about ServiceNow software asset management is its content normalization library. So once we've got that reclamation rule established, then once a month, a scheduled job will run that ships with our integration, which is going to go out, and for any of these reclamation rules that have been created, it will go out to the application usage endpoint, computer application usage, and it will pull that information, aggregate it, and then create a software usage record. And then the next day, the ServiceNow job runs, which will compare the usages to the reclamation rules and then generate a reclamation candidate for anybody that didn't meet that usage requirement. So here we can take a look at what that looks like. It's going to generate this task record, basically, which has information about the user who's not meeting the requirements, potential savings. It's got the software installation so that I can actually see that install on their computer, and we can see the actual computer that it's installed on. And then this is the message that goes out to the user. It's installed on this device. It's been flagged for reclamation due to low usage. So we can set this up to remove it without reaching out to the user. Generally, people find that to be a little bit harsh. But once it's gotten into this awaiting revocation phase, then if there is an uninstall policy that's been configured with the software configuration in the software portal that we were looking at a minute ago, once it gets into that awaiting revocation phase, it will then kick off that workflow, reach out to the Jamf API, and then move this computer here into the uninstall policy scope, and then also it would move them out of the install policy. You can also shortcut this process and just potentially click the reclaim button if you aren't worried about it. Maybe if they haven't, if several months have gone on in this state where Eric is not using software, designer software like Photoshop because he is a backend developer, then, if you just know that you can reclaim it, you can go ahead and click that reclaim button to shortcut the process. And again, these records, these reclamation candidate records, can be generated with or without the uninstall policy. The uninstall policy portion is just what helps you to automate it. And then what you can do is you can kind of coordinate with procurement so that when they need to get licenses for software, say the next time you have a new hire who needs Photoshop, instead of going out and buying another license for Photoshop, you can potentially take a look here in the reclamation candidates table and see, is there anybody who's maybe not using Photoshop enough that we can just kind of reallocate that license? And it's that reallocation and the reclamation which helps to reduce inefficiency and waste. And that's where you really get that 22% software savings that we talked about in the previous slides. So that's pretty much it for the software reclamation demo. Now this next piece, triggering remote management commands from ServiceNow to Jamf. This is very new. It's come out basically in the last month, and it allows you to trigger Jamf remote management commands either from a CI in the Cmdb, or you can do it programmatically using the ITS Jamf remote management util. Typically in the past, we've had most of our script includes protected, meaning they're kind of hidden from users. Starting in 1.2.2, we're starting to open up more of our script includes to enable our users to potentially build out custom workflows, custom pieces of functionality around the functionality that is enabled by the integration. So in order to do this remote management command, we basically just need to have run the main hardware Cmdb import, which we did in our first demo. And then we can navigate to a Jamf discovered computer, select a computer, and then click the ITS Jamf remote management suite related link on a computer form, execute, or we can access it via scripting. So I'm going to show you the former. I'm going to show you how to do it through the UI. So let me go ahead and switch back over to one of my ServiceNow tabs here. And so what we're going to do is just go ahead and type Jamf discovered. This shows you everything that is imported by the integration. I'm going to go ahead and pick a virtual machine so that I don't disrupt somebody's actual computer. And then we just scroll down into the related links here. And then now we've got a new related link that is found in the integration where we can trigger any of these remote management commands. We will likely be adding support for more of these in a future release, but these are the commands that ship today. So you can enable or disable Bluetooth, enable or disable remote desktop, and then probably the few that the ones that are probably the most interesting, I think, are locking the device or erasing the device or initiating the remote assist session. So locking device will require a 6-digit passcode. And once we enter this and hit the execute button, the computer, this virtual machine, is going to be locked, and it will not be able to be unlocked unless somebody enters in this code. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. We've got another little pop-up alerting us, and bam, it succeeded. So I could go out to Jamf and potentially look at the pending commands and cancel that. But once it has actually reached the computer, there's kind of no turning back aside from canceling that command. So definitely use this with caution. Along that note, I mean, everybody on this call is pretty much a Jamf admin, so you're probably nervous about opening this functionality up to the rest of IT. And so just a quick note about that. This is something which is only enabled by people who have the ServiceNow admin role, or people that you have granted the ITS Jamf admin role. So our application ships with two roles. One is a Jamf user. Anybody who has the Jamf user role will be able to kind of read this data and view the very basic modules. Anybody with the admin role is potentially going to have access to this Jamf remote management suite. You can potentially permission it a little bit stricter if you want, and only grant it to certain users. You can create your own role or ACLs on that. A lot of different ways to make sure that that is secure and only being accessed by the appropriate people. So, I mean, that's pretty much it. Again, you can also, if you were to go in and take a look at script includes, we could, oops, I'm gonna open that in this tab actually. So I think it's just remote. Got to actually type that correctly. Yeah, there we go. So this is the ITS Jamf Remote Management Util. So you can take a look at this, and you can kind of see how to, what is being expected of the inputs and outputs. We've got a little bit of documentation in here where, the input that's being expected is going to be the glide record of a computer, which is a Jamf computer. So glide record is kind of a ServiceNow functionality for records in the system, basically. So that is basically it in terms of our basic functionality. We also, along that same note, actually, I'm gonna do one more quick screen share. This is maybe a little bit of like a bonus. So we are starting to, as I mentioned, open up more functionality so that you can kind of build your own stuff. And along that line, we now have this ITS Jamf policy util. So our Jamf software portal basically only allows you to kind of interact with the Jamf install policies and uninstall policies. That's the intention, at least. And so this Jamf policy util is a public script which can enable you to build workflows or trigger scripting to manage any Jamf policy. So if you have Jamf policies which enable maybe different security settings, you can create catalog items or workflows and trigger these policy methods and orchestrate all that stuff from ServiceNow. So that's a brand new piece of functionality that just came out in version 1.2.2. So yeah, we're really excited about that, hoping to kind of continue along that story and add a little bit more remote support functionality in the coming months. Just kind of continue to help people work through their increased workloads as they support more users. I can hear my cat Shinji meowing at the door, which I think means it's actually the end of the end of the session here. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to use the survey widget below to give us some feedback. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you got something out of this, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your conference. Thanks.